NFL players are turning on Stefon Diggs, and some believe he's gone too far. From former teammates calling him one of the worst teammates they've ever had, to a new teammate saying he wouldn't let Diggs near his sister, the accusations keep piling up. Let me break it down. Let's start where this actually got loud, inside the room Diggs just walked into. On August 7th, a reporter asked Washington Commanders guard Sam Cosmi about his new teammate. Not about his route running, not about his hands, about Diggs, the man. Cosmi didn't hesitate. He told the reporter he wouldn't let Diggs date his sister. That's it. No punchline, no wink, just a lineman on Diggs' own new team, on the record, telling the world he doesn't trust the guy around the women in his family. Here's what makes that line land the way it does. It wasn't new. Cosmi was referencing a 2017 viral Minnesota Vikings segment in which players named Diggs the teammate they'd least want to date their sister. Think about that for a second. This isn't one guy with a grudge. This is a pattern that's followed Diggs across 3 different rosters, nearly a decade apart, with completely different players independently landing on the same verdict. Different locker room, different city, different jersey number, even. Same answer. And Diggs knew about the reputation back then. Despite Diggs' claims in that video that he's actually a great guy, he has not helped his case amid a slew of off-field issues over the years. He tried to get ahead of the narrative once. It didn't stick. Now in 2026, a brand new teammate is dusting off the exact same line. Except this time, it's not a lighthearted locker room game show. This time, it's landing against a backdrop of actual courtrooms. Because here's the thing about Cosmi's comment that separates it from a throwaway joke: the timing. Diggs signed with Washington after months of sitting unclaimed on the open market, a stretch where he was still a free agent almost halfway through July, after a season with the New England Patriots in which he racked up 85 catches for 1,013 yards and 4 touchdowns, and NFL teams didn't seem keen on signing him despite that production. 32 teams. A guy putting up 1,000-yard numbers, and almost nobody called. When a receiver with that kind of tape can't get a phone call for months, it usually isn't about his legs. So when he finally lands somewhere, and the very first thing a new teammate says about him publicly is a joke about not trusting him around his own sister, that's not just a jab. That's a locker room telling you, before he's even played a snap, what they already know about him. Diggs' name has been dragged into multiple lawsuits that probably wouldn't be a popular topic at the Thanksgiving table, but the team would probably still be more than okay for him to get several targets this season. Read that twice. Even the outlet covering the joke admitted the quiet part out loud. The team wants the production. They just don't necessarily want him at the family dinner. Cosmi isn't the only voice either. Rewind to Buffalo, to a Sunday in London during Diggs' final stretch with the Bills. The cameras caught him losing it on the sideline in the 4th quarter of a stalled drive, while quarterback Josh Allen just stood there and watched. Cameras caught an outburst by Diggs on the sideline as Allen just stared at his teammate. Fans didn't need Allen to say a word. The silence did the talking, and the reaction online was instant, with one fan flatly calling it the behavior of the worst teammate ever. That wasn't an isolated flare-up either. It was part of a stretch where Diggs' frustration boiled over more than once. After a divisional round loss that same stretch, he went public with it himself, posting that he wasn't going to pretend to be fine with a level of play that didn't meet the standard, and that it was easy for people to criticize his reaction more than the actual result that caused it. That's the pattern. Something goes wrong on the field, and Diggs' response becomes the story instead of the game. Now stack that next to what's happening in New England before Washington ever entered the picture. When Diggs first arrived with the Patriots, before a single regular season snap, a boat video hit social media over a holiday weekend. Diggs surrounded by people, including his then girlfriend, with an unidentified pink substance in view. Stefon Diggs raised concerns when a video emerged of him, rapper Cardi B, and a few other women partying on a boat with some unknown pink substance. Coaches got asked about it directly. Fans didn't wait for answers. They went straight to the harshest red available, with one declaring flatly that he should have been cut days ago, calling the whole situation a bad look for a guy who was supposed to be earning trust with a brand new coaching staff. Others weren't even being subtle about what they suspected, with one fan bluntly asking if he brought the drugs and women with him to the very practice facility. Even his own head coach didn't dodge the question. Mike Vrabel commented on it publicly, and the video traveled far enough that league headquarters had to weigh in on the record. Their answer was one sentence. They weren't commenting. Chief NFL spokesman Brian McCarthy told PFT via email that the NFL will decline comment on the matter. Silence from the league office on a video like that isn't nothing. It's a fine line the NFL walks whenever a star is involved, and the evidence is a viral clip instead of a police report. So string it together, a 2017 locker room voting him the guy they least trust with their sisters. A 2026 new teammate resurrecting that exact same line unprompted. A quarterback who wouldn't even engage with him on a sideline. A league office that went quiet rather than defend him. That's 4 separate rooms: Minnesota, Buffalo, New England, Washington. And 4 separate moments where the people closest to Diggs chose distance over defense. None of that by itself is a courtroom, but it's the temperature check. It's the sense, from the men who actually share a facility with him, that something about Diggs makes them want to keep him at arm's length, even while he's catching their passes. And that temperature, cold, guarded, half joking, but not really, is exactly the atmosphere that's followed Diggs into something far more serious than a locker room joke. Because while teammates were cracking wise about trust, Diggs was also walking into a Massachusetts courtroom to answer for something a lot heavier than a joke about his sister. Before Cosme ever cracked that joke in Washington, Diggs was already deep into the most serious legal fight of his career, one that had nothing to do with a locker room and everything to do with a felony charge. It started with his private chef. In December, the woman who cooked for Diggs accused him of hitting her in the face during what's been described as a pay dispute and of strangling her with his elbow around her neck. The NFL star was facing charges of assault and battery in connection with an alleged pay dispute with his personal chef, with the accuser saying Diggs hit her in the face and strangled her with his elbow around her neck. That's not a fender-bender charge. That's a felony strangulation allegation, stacked on top of misdemeanor assault and battery. The kind of case that, on paper, ends careers before they even get to trial. Diggs pleaded not guilty almost immediately. Diggs later pleaded not guilty to the criminal charges. But here's where it gets complicated for a guy trying to hold on to his roster spot. The timing of the court system almost collided directly with the biggest game of his career. His arraignment got pushed back, specifically so it wouldn't interfere with the Super Bowl. His arraignment at Massachusetts Dedham District Court was rescheduled until after Super Bowl LX, allowing him to play in the championship game. Think about what that means. A man facing a felony strangulation charge was allowed to suit up, practice, and play in the sport's biggest game, with the legal system essentially pausing itself around his football schedule. That's the kind of detail that fuels the argument that something is broken here. Not that Diggs got away with anything, but that the sport's biggest showcase took priority over a felony docket. The Patriots, for their part, didn't wait for a verdict before making their move. Reports of his release came directly on the heels of that court delay, with insiders confirming the New England Patriots were releasing Stefon Diggs amid his ongoing legal issues, with an insider league source sharing that the team would part ways with their wide receiver at the start of the new league year. Officially, the team pointed to the money. His cap number was about to balloon, and cutting him early saved them from guaranteeing millions more. But the legal cloud hanging over him made the decision a lot easier to explain publicly. Then came the trial itself. In May, Diggs walked into Dedham District Court for 2 days of testimony, and the case that had shadowed his entire Patriots tenure hit its climax. He didn't take a plea. He didn't cut a deal. He rolled the dice with a jury, and it paid off. A league official told ESPN's Adam Schefter that the NFL had closed its review of Stefon Diggs after determining there was insufficient evidence of a personal conduct policy violation, a decision that came after the former Patriots wideout was found not guilty of assaulting his private chef in a pay dispute. A legal analyst summed up exactly how big a gamble that was. Diggs defeated the threat of the most serious legal consequence, criminal conviction and potential incarceration. He notably declined a plea deal, where he could have pleaded to a lesser offense and perhaps avoided any jail time, and instead took his chances before a jury. The move proved correct. That's a receiver betting his freedom on a jury instead of a guaranteed lighter sentence. He won that bet. But winning a not guilty verdict and having the league close its file doesn't erase the fact that a felony strangulation charge existed in the first place, or that it hung over an entire championship run. And that's really the split you have to sit with. On one side, the legal system did its job. A jury heard evidence and made a call, and the NFL's own internal review, working off a much lower bar than a criminal court, still came back with the same answer. Not enough here to act on. The NFL closed its review of wide receiver Stefon Diggs after determining there was insufficient evidence of a personal conduct policy violation, no suspension. no fine, no further discipline. On the other side, you have a man whose entire storybook season, signing a 9-figure adjacent deal, catching passes from a rising young quarterback, reaching the Super Bowl, happened while a felony charge sat over his head the entire time, only getting resolved months after the confetti fell. That's the tension NFL players keep coming back to. It's not that the courts got it wrong. It's that a guy can walk through an entire year at the top of his sport, with an unresolved violent felony allegation attached to his name, keep playing every week, get his contract structured around him, appear in a championship game, and only face consequences, or the lack of them, long after the moment that mattered competitively has already passed. By the time the not guilty verdict landed and the league closed its file, the season was already over. The ring ceremony already happened, and Diggs was already a free agent negotiating his next contract, like none of it had touched him at all. That's part of why players around the league keep bringing him up in conversations that have nothing to do with route trees. Because to them, the Chef case wasn't a one-off. It was the first domino, and almost the moment that legal clouds started to clear. An entirely different and far more serious allegation was already waiting in the wings. Here's where the story stops being about a sideline tantrum or even a felony charge that a jury cleared and turns into something a locker room can't joke its way past. The accuser's name is Christopher Griffith, and his claim is about as serious as it gets. He says that back in 2023, after a charity basketball game in Washington, D.C., he ended up back at Diggs' home in Rockville, Maryland, and that Diggs drugged him and sexually assaulted him. Griffith claims Diggs drugged and sexually assaulted him in 2023 after a charity basketball game. And in Griffith's police report from 2023, he also claimed Diggs offered him candy that was laced with drugs without his knowledge, before Diggs allegedly exposed himself and began masturbating in front of him, at which point Griffith says he told Diggs to put himself away and tried to leave. It doesn't end at the house. Griffith says that when he tried to get out, things escalated further. He claims he ended up hiding in Diggs' bathroom for over half an hour, fearing for his safety, before finally leaving. And then, according to Griffith, the retaliation started. 1 week later, Griffith was allegedly assaulted outside of his Los Angeles apartment and suffered serious injuries. He believes it wasn't random. He's alleged it in his own filings that Diggs orchestrated it, pointing directly at Diggs' brother Derez and others. Diggs didn't wait around. He went on offense legally. Months before Griffith's side of the story became public in full, he filed a defamation suit first, arguing Griffith invented the entire story. After Chris Blake Griffith accused Stefon Diggs of sexual assault, the New England Patriots star sued for libel, with the NFL wide receiver saying the would-be social media influencer fabricated a story about an alleged incident at his Rockville home in May 2023. Diggs' own account of that night is dramatically smaller in scope. He says he barely crossed paths with Griffith after the basketball game, went out with a group that included him, and that everyone ended up back at his house together. Nothing more. Griffith didn't back down. He countersued, and he raised the stakes. Griffith is filing a countersuit against the New England Patriots wide receiver, denying Diggs' claims of libel. From there, this stopped being a private dispute and turned into a full-blown discovery war, with both sides trying to dig up receipts to bury the other. Griffith says he's got them. He claims he handed over well over 100 pages of direct communication between himself and Diggs, spanning multiple platforms specifically to back up his version of events. In court docs, Stefon's accuser, Christopher Griffith, claims he produced over 100 pages of communications, including texts on iMessage and Instagram, between himself and Diggs. Diggs' side tried to argue Griffith hadn't turned over everything relevant, specifically Instagram messages, but Griffith's camp fired back that if those messages exist, Diggs has them too, since he was on the other end of every single one. A federal judge ultimately sided with pushing for more transparency, ordering Griffith's full unedited Instagram history with Diggs turned over, records that reach back to cover the disputed 2023 trip itself. Then it got even messier. Griffith didn't just claim there were texts. He claimed those texts and phone records directly tied Diggs to orchestrating the retaliatory assault. The legal battle involving Stefon Diggs entered another contentious phase after the NFL star's attorney publicly responded to new claims that text messages and phone records linked Diggs to an alleged assault on his accuser, marking Diggs' strongest denial yet of allegations that he orchestrated an attack intended to silence Christopher Griffith. Diggs' team didn't just deny it quietly. His lawyer went hard on the record, calling Griffith's entire campaign an act of extreme and outrageous conduct, accusing him of knowingly publishing false statements tying Diggs to violence, sexual assault, drugging people, and serious crimes, and saying it had caused real damage to his name. There's a strange wrinkle buried in all of this too. Diggs' own brother has already quietly resolved his piece of it. A related civil case against Diggs' brother Darez has been confidentially settled, though Griffith's claims against Stefon Diggs remain active. A settlement isn't an admission of guilt in the eyes of the law, but to a public watching from the outside, a member of Diggs' own family quietly making that part of the fight go away, while Diggs himself keeps fighting his half in open court. Doesn't exactly read as nothing, and the war of words hasn't cooled off. If anything, it's gotten uglier. Diggs took to social media himself to call Griffith a liar in blunt, ugly terms, and that post itself has now become fresh ammunition for Griffith's legal team, who tried to add it to their case as a new act of defamation. Diggs' lawyers pushed back on that specific attempt just last week, arguing the post wasn't defamatory because in their view, Griffith really did lie. Diggs opposed Christopher Griffith's request to amend his countersuit by adding new claims and evidence after Griffith recently asked the court for permission to include allegations that Diggs defamed him after he commented on the lawsuit on social media. Griffith, for his part, hasn't shied away from the spotlight. He's gone on camera multiple times, on shows built for viral clips, laying out his version in his own words. He's acknowledged the optics aren't clean, telling one interviewer he understands why people might read a picture and text trail and assume there was something romantic going on between him and Diggs before anything ever went wrong, even while insisting that's not what actually happened. He's also pushed back hard on the idea that any of this is about money, insisting publicly that a payout was never the point, that somebody has to answer for what he says happened to him, and that he's ready to make his case in front of a jury, just like Diggs already did in his other trial. None of this has been decided by a jury yet. No court has ruled on the actual merits of either the assault claim or the defamation claim. That's an important thing to sit with. This is still an open fight, still working through discovery, still months, if not longer, from any kind of resolution. But that's exactly the point players and fans keep raising. Diggs already stood trial once this year on a felony charge and won. Now he's fighting a second legal battle, this one alleging something even darker, and it's happening at the exact same time he's trying to convince 32 teams he's worth the risk. That's not a rumor floating around a group chat. That's an active federal court case with a judge, a discovery schedule, and two sides trading accusations that get uglier every single month. And underneath all of it sits a name that's now attached to two separate legal storms running at once. Because while Diggs was fighting Griffith's sexual assault claim, an entirely different lawsuit tied to a stolen sports car was quietly building against him too. If the Griffith case is the most serious fight Diggs is in, the Ferrari lawsuit is the one that shows just how many fronts this war actually has, and how his family keeps getting pulled into it right alongside him. It starts with a car. In the summer of 2024, Diggs needed his Ferrari moved Miami to New York, then on to Houston. He asked a man named Nigel King to handle the logistics. Somewhere along that route, the car disappeared. In July 2024, King arranged for Diggs' Ferrari to be transported to Houston. The car was stolen. That alone would just be an unfortunate insurance claim. What turned it into a lawsuit is what happened next. King says law enforcement never named him a suspect. King claims he was never identified as a suspect in the theft. But according to his side of the story, Diggs didn't wait for police to sort it out. He started telling people close to both of them that King was the one who stole it. King also contends that in December 2024, Diggs began accusing King of stealing the car. Words like that aimed at someone in your circle can follow a person. King says they did more than follow him. He claims that roughly a year after those accusations started, he ended up getting physically attacked, and he's pointing the finger directly at people connected to Diggs. King also claims that a year later, Diggs' friend punched King in the face. So King sued, and he didn't just name Diggs. Someone who claims he used to work for Diggs is suing the wideout for a slew of alleged offenses, all stemming from the New England player's stolen Ferrari. With the lawsuit going after Diggs for alleged defamation, civil conspiracy, vicarious liability and ratification, and aiding and abetting assault and battery. That's a legal shopping list. Defamation for the accusation. Conspiracy for allegedly organizing a response. Vicarious liability for the people acting on his behalf. And an aiding and abetting charge tied directly to the alleged punch. And just like the Griffith case, this one doesn't stop at Diggs, it runs straight through his family. Both of Diggs' brothers, Packers cornerback Trevon Diggs and former college DB Darez Marcian Diggs, are also named as defendants in the lawsuit. Think about the scope of that for a second. This isn't a lawsuit against one football player who had a bad week. It's a lawsuit that's pulled in an active starting NFL cornerback, a younger brother already tangled up in a separate assault allegation from the Griffith case, and Diggs himself, all three named together over one stolen car and its aftermath. The lawsuit landed at about the worst possible moment for Diggs to have to think about anything other than football, right before the Super Bowl. Just before Super Bowl 2026 gets underway, Patriots star wide receiver Stefon Diggs has been named in another lawsuit. Same story as the Chef case, same story as the Griffith case. Every time it looks like Diggs is about to get a clean stretch to just play football, another filing shows up. The case has been slow walking through procedure ever since. Diggs' side asked the court to hold off moving forward until the other named defendants, including his brothers and friends, were properly served. Diggs, per the latest report as to a case that first surfaced in early 2026, requested that the case not proceed until the other defendants are properly served. And the other defendants have since been served, which should set the stage for the litigation to unfold, likely slowly, as most civil lawsuits do. That's not resolution. That's just the starting gun for a much longer fight still to come. Now here's where it connects back to that boat video from part 1. Because that pink powder clip wasn't just a random viral moment. It happened during the exact stretch when Diggs was trying to prove to a brand new coaching staff in New England that he'd bought into a culture built on discipline. Offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels tried to wave it off publicly at the time, telling reporters he wasn't worried, saying Diggs was staying on top of the material and that there'd be plenty of chances to keep developing him before the season actually started. Wide receivers coach Todd Downing offered similar public reassurance. But reassurance from coaches trying to protect a locker room is a different thing than trust from the players actually living in it. And that gap is exactly what Cosme's comment, months later in a completely different city, ended up exposing. Look at the shape of everything by now. A felony strangulation charge, a sexual assault allegation with active federal discovery, a stolen car dispute that's pulled in two brothers and multiple friends as named defendants, a viral video with an unidentified substance that made the league office go quiet rather than comment. None of these are the same case. None of them share the same accuser, the same court, or even the same state. But they all share the same name at the center, and they've all landed inside roughly the same 18-month window of his career. The same window where he was catching passes in conference championships and a Super Bowl. That's the pattern players keep pointing to when this conversation comes up. It's not any single allegation. It's the volume. It's a man who can't seem to complete an offseason without a new filing landing on his lawyer's desk, while somehow still performing well enough on Sundays that teams keep circling back around to ask if he's available. And as all of that legal weight kept piling up, the one relationship that had stood next to him through almost all of it, the one visible in the AFC Championship interviews, on the boat, in the wedding videos, was quietly falling apart behind the scenes too. By the time free agency opened, Diggs wasn't just fighting lawsuits. He was fighting for a job and doing it almost entirely alone. The relationship that had been front and center through the biggest moments of his season ended right around the same time the Patriots cut him loose. Diggs and rapper Cardi B reportedly called it quits, with the former couple sharing a son, who was born in November of 2025. That's not a small detail to lose in the middle of a legal firestorm. One of the few public voices willing to defend him, gone, right as the accusations against him were multiplying. She'd stood up for him publicly against Griffith's claims, at one point drawing a sharp response back from Griffith himself, who said flatly that she'd simply been misled. Once she was gone from his corner, that particular defense went quiet too. Meanwhile, the market for a two-time All-Pro receiver coming off a 1,000-yard season was by any normal standard supposed to be active. It wasn't. Reports throughout the spring described a slow trickle of interest rather than a bidding war. 5 teams had inquired about Stefon Diggs, with analysts discussing whether the veteran receiver still had enough left to make an impact in 2026. 5 teams checking in isn't nothing, but for a player with his production, it's a fraction of what you'd expect. If the legal cloud weren't hanging over every conversation, one outlet put it about as plainly as it can be put. His football tape was never really the question mark. He's a wide receiver with elite talent who is constantly involved in off-field problems. With training camps just a few weeks away, he found himself on the outside looking in, sidelined not by a lack of ability, but by the financial reality of his contract and the shadow of civil litigation. That's about as clear a verdict as the football world has offered. Not that he can't play, but that almost everything surrounding his ability to play has become a liability someone else has to be willing to absorb. Eventually, someone was. Washington emerged as the frontrunner, with league sources describing real momentum toward a deal well before it became official. The Commanders and 2X All-Pro WR Stefon Diggs have had deep discussions, and there's mutual interest in doing a deal. One insider said, adding that expectations around the league were that Diggs would end up in Washington soon. And that's exactly the room he walked into. The same room where almost immediately, a guard he'd never played a snap with felt comfortable enough to bring up the sister joke unprompted in his very first real introduction to the new locker room. That's the environment Diggs is stepping into for whatever comes next. Not a fresh start in the way that phrase usually gets used. More like a very talented player being absorbed by a team, willing to take on the football upside while everyone around him, coaches, teammates, reporters, openly treats the off-field version of him as a completely separate, ongoing problem that just happens to wear the same jersey. The Griffith case is still active, still working through discovery, with no trial date locked in and no ruling on the actual merits from any court. The Ferrari lawsuit is just getting past the stage of making sure everyone named in it has even been formally served. Both of those fights could stretch for another year or more before either side gets anywhere near a jury. The Chef case is closed, a jury cleared him, and the league followed suit. But 2 other legal fronts remain wide open, and neither one is going away just because he's found a new team to play for. That's really what NFL players are responding to when they talk about Diggs the way they have. Not a single incident, and not a settled question of guilt or innocence in the cases still working through the courts. It's the sheer accumulation. A felony charge that took a jury to clear. An active sexual assault allegation with 100+ pages of disputed messages sitting in a federal docket. A stolen car that turned into a conspiracy lawsuit against him and both of his brothers. A boat video that made the league itself go silent rather than comment. A locker room joke that survived almost word for word across 3 different teams in 9 years. None of that guarantees anything about how the open cases will end. Griffith could be vindicated. He could just as easily see his claims dismissed. The Ferrari suit could settle quietly the way his brother's piece of it already has. Or it could drag through years of depositions. What isn't in dispute is the environment Diggs now plays in. A league that's decided, for now, his football is worth the risk. Even as the men closest to him keep signaling, one lawsuit and one locker room joke at a time, that the risk is very real. Whatever happens on the field this season, that shadow is walking into the building with him every single day.